I'm recording my homily for the Sunday following Christmas, which this year we celebrated the Holy Family. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, I want to talk about how the example of the Holy Family lends itself to our families and how we understand family in general. And in the gospel is about the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And so when they bring Jesus to the temple, they present him to the temple. You have Simeon and Anna there, kind of like, if you will, elderly prophets or elders of the community who are very holy, and how they receive the Holy Family. And so they use all of this as kind of like a model of just the very nature of how we can reclaim some things in our lives. The reality is, we know that families and our families and our communities and our parishes are struggling. They're struggling for many different reasons, but they're struggling. And so how to redevelop the beauty of that sense of identity. So a mechanic is someone who works on cars, right? They fix cars. Now a mechanic may be someone who loves really, really expensive, beautiful cars that are in perfect condition. But they're not going to work on those cars. The cars they're going to work on are going to be the cars that are broken. They're often older and maybe not taken care of very well, or they're just starting to break down a lot. You know, they're over 100,000 miles, 150,000 miles. And so the mechanic has to be someone, not necessarily someone who just loves cars, but someone who loves fixing broken cars. Okay? So that's a mechanic. A doctor is someone who may have a great appreciation for what a healthy body should be like, but the reality is they're going to spend most of their time with broken bodies, with people who are ill and infirmed, and et cetera, and or maybe people making really bad health choices. And so that's who the doctor is going to be serving or paying most attention to. Now, a doctor, to be a good doctor, has to really love helping people who have infirmities, who don't have perfect bodies, right? Okay. As a pastor, I could say the same thing as a pastor, you know, I can aspire to read about the saints and beautiful theology and the scriptures and all those perfect and wonderful things, right? But as a pastor, I'm going to spend most of my time with people who are struggling, people who are sinners, people who just they're losing their way, or they need some kind of help. And if it's within the context of a family, sometimes it's just counseling or some spiritual guidance, right? And so the thing is that we do not live in a perfect world. Our families are not perfect. My family, your family, our families are not perfect. And that's the world we live in. Now, the beautiful thing is that the Holy Spirit never said that we had to be perfect before the Holy Spirit worked. The Holy Spirit is like a mechanic or a doctor or a pastor or a shepherd. And the Holy Spirit recognizes that we're not perfect, but the Holy Spirit still wants to work. And so even I'm going to go through things, and I'm just going to shed light on the fact that our families are not perfect, right? And we live in a culture that's not perfect. But the Holy Spirit still wants to work. A couple years ago, I remember hearing a phrase in the political scene, and the phrase was this. And it didn't really have anything to do with children per se. I think it had more to do with government funding, but this was the phrase. It takes a village to raise a child, right? Have you heard that phrase? It takes a village to raise a child. Now, that phrase did not originate in the political scene. It's a much more traditional phrase. And I remember when I heard it, though, I got kind of mad, and my answer was, no, it doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes a mom and a dad. It takes a mom and a dad to raise a child. And part of that, I was reflecting kind of in a resentful way the fact that so many marriages are broken and there's problems, and many kids don't have a mom and a dad. I have a family member who used to work in a school, and they said that there was this one year where they had an entire class of kids, like 30 kids, and not one of them had both parents. Okay? So that was my take was, the reality is I grew up very far from extended family. We grew up in Texas. My mom's family was in Seattle. My dad's family was in New York City. We did not grow up around aunts and uncles and cousins. We had nobody around us. It was just our family. And so in my experiences, it's like, no, it doesn't take more than mom and dad. They just need to raise the family. Since then, over the few years as a pastor, I've realized that there's a lot that needs to happen in order to create a healthy family. That yes, a healthy family could exist around lots of really bad things. Yes, that's true. But normally, if you want to have a lot of good families, something has to happen outside the family in order to create that environment, okay? So in some ways, to understand it correctly, does it take a village to raise a child? Well, let's talk about what that means, right? A number of years ago, a group of people who go on a mission trip to Honduras approached me and said that they wanted me to come with them that year. They like to have a priest go with them. So they were a medical mission team, doctors, nurses, etc. And so I went with them. And part of the trip is, so we stayed at a compound right next door to an orphanage. And this was my first time going to see a real orphanage, because we don't have them in the United States. And the only other personal experience I had was just second or third hand from my dad, who relayed a few stories to us about my grandfather, so his dad, who grew up in an orphanage in New York City. And his dad never, ever once talked about it to us, because it was just understood that it was a very, very bad experience, that it was not a nice place to be. So as we go down to Honduras, I'm thinking to myself, this is just not going to be a very nice place. The kids are probably going to be depressed and not very happy, and probably lots of problems. So we get down there, and I have to tell you, it just blew me away at how much love was there. There was so much love. And the love was between the kids, between each other. There was a lot of respect. There was order. There was discipline. There was love between the tias, the mothers who kind of worked there and took care of the kids, right? There was a lot of love between them and the kids. You could see it just in how they were affectionate with each other. And there was some men also who worked in the surrounding area, teachers and men who just worked there, and they were like fathers to the kids. Just lots and lots of love. It was beautiful to see that. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was really, really amazing. They had a chapel there, and so anytime a priest came through, they would have daily mass, and all the kids would come. Now, the kids were so excited to serve mass that at a normal daily mass, I would have like 13 altar servers. And I have to tell you, they were really good. They were very disciplined. They're like blue angels, just in formation. It was amazing to me. So the whole experience was really amazing. So I come back home to my parish, and I can't even get servers. I mean, I have a church, and there's some kids, but the kids don't want to serve. And then also just in the wider community, I noticed that kids, they're not like the kids that were in Honduras. They're not happy. They're not bursting with joy. They're not disciplined, or they're argumentative, or all those things. And so I was wondering to myself, why is that? Why were the kids in Honduras who had no families, why were they doing so good? Especially when you'd hear their backgrounds. These kids had horrible experiences. That's why they were there. And yet they're thriving. And then you come to the United States where we have everything. But in some ways it's like we have nothing, right? Because there is something missing. What was the difference? And I'm not advocating that we need to send our kids to boarding schools or orphanages, okay? I'm not advocating that. But here's what I think is missing in our culture. And it comes down to this. Time. Time. The kids in the orphanage are together all the time. They are with their tias, the moms, all the time. They do everything together. They have their schoolwork there, they have their play, they have their work, their prayer, their entire routine, everything is together. And so if that environment is loving, then it's amazing. Now here's the thing, is that in that environment, they're not under pressure. They're not under pressure to go here and there and everywhere. They're not under any kind of pressure. It's just going through the daily routine, which involves God and it involves family, their orphanage family. And then here, we don't have any time. Now, I consider myself very blessed. My mom was able to be a stay-at-home mom for most of the time. And I think, and I say this kind of joking, but kind of not joking. And if you had known me when I was younger, you would have understood this. If my mom had not been a stay-at-home mom, I would be in prison right now. I needed no help getting in trouble. I needed no help getting to prison. And so there were certain safety nets in place that I think prevented that from happening and helped me to become this person rather than the other person, right? Now, it doesn't mean everything was perfect growing up just because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But there was something about that time that we had as a family. That when we came home, our mom was there. When we left, our mom was there. There was just something very powerful about that time. Now, I want you to understand that what I'm about to say, I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm simply saying this is where we're at as a culture, okay? And we can reflect on ourselves and the situation we have right now. Families where both parents work full-time. Now, the reality is, most people who work full-time now, they work more than full-time. They work more than 40 hours a week. And if you add their commute times, it's even more. And so there's very, very little time together. And so the kids, they simply don't have that time. They don't have that time with mom and dad anymore. And kids, they love their parents, but they don't know how to fix that problem. And sometimes they don't even know there is a problem because that's what they grew up with. But there is no time. And when they are together, when the family is together, there's pressure. There's the pressure to go here and go there and get this done and get this done because they spend most of their time at work. And so the weekend is not relaxed. The weekend is a frenzy to catch up or do things, right? And even the relaxed time is not really relaxed. In the orphanage, I saw a peacefulness. There was a relaxedness about it, and there was time. And here, there's no time. Now, you look at, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see in the camera, but you look at the nativity scene of Mary and Joseph and Jesus, and the animals and the people are relaxed. And no, it's not they have nothing there, but they have time. They're not in a rush. Now, some people might be thinking, oh, I wish I could have that. Or they might be thinking, that's what vacation's for. But we don't relax on our vacations. We go out and we do things, right? Our normal daily routine should not be frenzied. Kids need peacefulness and time to relax, simply with family and to be in love that way. Time is important. To have time. The other thing that I wanted to bring up in this is the nature of an outside support system for families. And so you may say this is time, but this is a little bit different. So talk about availability. Availability to create. The availability to create a wider family. That's why we have parishes, right? So the parish should be, in many cases I think it's not, but it should be a spiritual family and a spiritual home. This should be a place where kids and moms and dads feel supported, and they have connections with other families that are spiritually inclined the same way. I think that's very important. Availability, the availability to do things, that's not the right word, because then that makes it sound like we need to accomplish things, but the availability to be present to a wider group of people. I can't tell you how many older people I've talked to where they've said, when we were young, you couldn't get into trouble because you would go out. If you got into trouble, you were immediately found out because the neighbors had the same authority. The neighbors could punish. The neighbors looked out for each other's kids. Everybody looked out for each other. That's really not the case anymore. We don't have that safety net. And so certain availability to be present to each other in a loving way. Whether it's as aunts and uncles and cousins, or it's simply our spiritual community. I would say those are the two highest levels of family, right? Blood and our spiritual family. And then the other areas as well, that we're looking out for each other. Let me give an example. When I was growing up, so my 3 older brothers were out of the house, and it was me and my 2 younger sisters and my mom, and so I was the oldest man, if you will, and so I should have been able to be a good older brother, a good son in those circumstances. My dad had just passed away the year before, and so my mom had to go back to work, right? So this is when she couldn't stay at home anymore. She had to go back to work, and she was working like night shift as a nurse, and life was not easy. And so my mom's grieving, my family's grieving. My mom has to go back to work full time now. And it was in that course of that time period too. My mom had cancer, and so very difficult time. Now, I stayed at home as I went to college, and you think, I was a good son. I stayed at home, support my mom. No, I was just too lazy to move out. I didn't want to pay rent. I didn't want to have to cook. I didn't want to have to clean. I was simply lazy. And when I graduated from college, I was making good money. I easily could have moved out, but I didn't. So my mom, God bless her heart, she's teaching me some lessons. She starts making me pay rent, and a lot. This was not like $100 a month. I was paying like full rent all the way. And I was mad. I was really mad, and I would fight with her on it. I would do anything to try to get out of it. I was just being selfish. I wanted the money. I had no appreciation of what she was going through. I remember one month I decided to give her extra money, like as reverse psychology, like she would feel sorry for me. Yeah, it didn't work. I was not available during that time. My sisters needed an older brother who really loved them, and that was not me. My mom needed a son who could step up, who could do things, who could be present in that way. That was not me. I simply did not have the ability to be available in the way that they needed. I was too concerned about myself. There's consequences, right? There's consequences to not having time for each other, for the kids, as a family. If a husband and wife are both working, and one's working, night shift and the other is working day shift, and they never see each other, the only time they see each other is when one of them is sleeping, there's consequences to that. There's a reason. I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but there's a reason why our divorce rate is fairly high. Stress is high. Time together is very low. And we're very rushed. Time, but not just time, being available, emotionally available. If everybody's tired when they get home, they are not emotionally available. If everybody just wants to escape when they get home because their job was so stressful, we're not emotionally available to each other. Joseph and Mary and Jesus, when they go to the temple, there's Simeon and Anna. Now, Simeon doesn't hesitate at all. He knows right away that this is the child, this is the Messiah. And so he runs up to this child and embraces and holds the baby, right? And so it's like a family, I remember this, a family that used to come to Mass at a different parish, and sometimes their kids would get a little squirrely. And in some parishes when that happens, people get all mad, they frown at the family because the kids are making noise. But in this situation, they knew the people around them, and so the people around them would help. They would actually, pick up the kids and help out mom and dad. And so Simeon reminds me of that he runs up and he grabs Jesus and he holds him. Now, a family, a good family, is able to bring in the Holy Family, is able to make Jesus, is able to embrace Jesus and have him be the center. Have him just be the heart of that family. And so Simeon, I think, sets an example of the wider community where Mary and Joseph must have felt really edified, really encouraged, especially with some of the other things going on, that here's this, I don't say stranger, but here's this man who truly loves them and sees the beauty of what God is doing in their family. Anna is the same way. She starts going around, it says that she was going around telling everybody what was happening. So it's to have that wider community. Our families need that. And so that's just, again, one more example of being spiritually, being emotionally, and being charity-wise, being available to each other to form a wider family. All right. God bless.